All right, so I'm starting a series on code reviews, basically, going over architecture, on patterns inside of the code, on things that I see that stand out as potential areas that might harm, or things that might stand out in a good way. So let's just start diving in. One of the first things I want to call out is the version. When I received this, the copy of the code, and this code, by the way, is a project that Sam Nielson was kind enough to let me review for this. And according to him, it is a party planner. I've got a party platformer I was working on a long time ago. I was implementing my own platform physics, and that system could probably use some critiques. Okay, so he was particularly focused on the platform physics. Now I'm going to give a few general critiques as well along the way, but I'm going to try to get over to the platform physics quickly. However, on a quick test just prior to this, I wasn't able to get the character to jump. So maybe I'll be able to discover that during this one. Okay, so first thing I want to call out on this is the version. When I got this, it was on 21.1, Unity 2021.1.09, A9. But it was basically, it was an alpha version, like one of the first releases, alpha releases of 2021. And so there might be some issues where I upgraded to the first final release that was available for that, which was the 2021.1.0F1. The F is for final, A is for alpha. And so I took the closest one hoping it would work. But when we're talking about alpha versions versus final versions, especially on that starter one that gets the project going, or that gets the release going, there's a reasonable chance that there might be breaking changes between the versions. And Unity is not in the habit of supporting alpha upgrades to the main branches, or to their final versions. They are in the business of supporting upgrades from other final versions to this current one. Okay, so let's start diving in. Anyway, there might be some some version differences because of that. The next thing I want to call out is the version itself. That if you're doing code in Unity, that I strongly recommend sticking to an LTS version. So an LTS version stands for long-term support. So if I can find that, I can pull that up. Here's Unity Hub. Grab Unity Hub, and then you can do installs, and you can install editor. And inside of here, it has official releases. Oh, they've got a new LTS version. So LTS means that they are supporting something long-term. That means that when they're making changes, or if they find a bug in a later version, they will back check it on this one as well. That they are checking bugs in this one and trying to fix them. And when customers are relaying things, especially more pricey customers who have like 20 or 30 or 1,000, Unity Pro licenses inside of their corporation, then they're going to be taking a more serious look at upgrading bugs that show up within it. But once it passes that, it's like a 2-year window, I believe, that any of these LTS versions will be supported. So 2019 is going to be reaching the end of life soon. But you can see they've had 37 updates on it. So then we have other versions in here, 2021.2. It is not an LTS version. That's something I recommend not doing if you can avoid it. If you have a feature in your game that is dependent on something that is only available in the latest version of Unity, then go for it. That's part of the pivotal nature of what you're doing in your game. Just know that it is not necessarily going to be updated. When dots first came out, it changed like 3 or 4 times before they stabilized the code base and have what they have now. Originally, you would try to follow a tutorial and it would be broken in a week or two. Okay. So anyway, here we are. So I would recommend an LTS version. Now in this case, you're already ahead, and backtracking or downgrading your code is not necessarily that feasible. I would recommend it if you don't have a specific reason that you're staying in 2021. Okay. Anyway, so back to projects. I don't even need projects at this point, but I do recommend Unity Hub as your basis because it can manage all of your installation versions, and as you can see, I run several. and 2021 in this case. And when I'm, depending on what I'm doing for clients, I will have different versions for those different applications for the clients. My default is to just stick with the latest LTS version that there is. So as soon as 2021 hits an LTS, I'll be upgrading my projects. That is my general plan. Now, I also recommend having GitHub or Collaborate or some other resource so you can backtrack that version if you need to. Okay, now I'm going to get rid of that. I didn't mean to completely delete it, whatever. Okay, so here is what I think is the starting scene of the project. There is something that I want to call out on here. When I first came into this, there was not a scripts folder inside of here. All of the scripts were in the root of the project. Actually, what is this? Managers. Oh, you have code in managers. Interesting. I did not see that before. Okay, anyway, the scripts folder, I created the scripts folder and drew everything out of it. They were all sitting in the root folder, so that's one recommendation I'm immediately going to call out. Your script should be in a scripts folder. Same, and it seems like most of your other code was all organized in things. However, it's organized in a way that doesn't necessarily match up with, oh wait, no, this is good for a lot of it. Oh, okay, I see what you did. Got it. These aren't like physics materials. This is physics. This is your code for physics. All right. I recommend that things like extra code libraries be placed as subfolders underneath your scripts. So other things where you're splitting it out, so you've got management code, I'm going to drag your management code under there as well. Let's see, audio. Is this audio code? This is actual music and sound effects. Good. Whoa, why is that taking a while? Whatever. Anyway, so let's get rid of that one. The fact that you're using data folders, you have some specialized, I can't think of a good word to do it, but a domain. You're using specific domain folders, like here are your levels, or you might have one for here are your maps or pre-saves or presets, things where your game is going to custom load it. That makes more sense. Okay, so this is also where your scenes are because you don't have a separate scenes folder. Now let's see, there's also one in here called settings. Okay, updaters, I'm going to move that into here as well. And, oh, it's taking so long. Why is that taking so long? Visuals. Oh, more scripts. Okay, got it. So there actually were a lot of scripts in here, but nothing inside of a scripts folder. Now I'm moving stuff around because this is a format that I would typically use. So there are some that are sitting in the root that aren't organized. There are some that are organized. And effectively, this is where I would be putting stuff. Okay, settings, nothing there. How about global variables? Same thing. Global variables might be a risk inside of this. Okay, so, which I'll take a look at that code a little in another minute or two. Scriptable objects, that's probably, yep, okay. Same thing, all goes into scripts. Okay, so now when I'm looking at your project, one thing I want to call out is really awesome here, the use of underscore in your folder. So I strongly recommend that anybody developing, sorry Bella, my puppy is sitting down below the desk. Or laying down at my feet. Okay, let's see. And by puppy, that's just the term I use for my dog. Okay. Now, let's see. So over here, the naming convention of using an underscore first, and then that is your content for the project. I strongly recommend that because that means as soon as you open up the assets or the project, inside of your assets, the first folder is your stuff. It kind of looks like external assets is where you're putting in content from additional places. Now, I would not do this. I don't tend to like to do this one. Let's see, resources, main. I'm just going to drag resources under game. I believe that should still work anyway, but there's a reason why I don't use resources anymore, and I can't remember why it was. If I recall right, if it was memory management and just controlling that something is loaded right away or available right away, that there are different ways to do it. And I didn't like the use of resources. I can't remember why though. So don't take anything about what I'm saying to say get rid of resources and don't use it just because I can't remember why I don't use it anymore. Okay, let's see. So all of these assets that are in there, I would usually have these in the root as well, because that's where they go by default. They don't all show up inside of a folder called external assets. That is something that was done after the fact that they were brought in. Okay, so there's your parallax background. This doesn't seem to have anything special in it, so no namespace or call out of who owns it. So I'm assuming the parallax background actually is part of scripts. So I'm just going to get rid of that. Yes. All right, so that's effectively all in there, all your scripts in there. And then these ones would just go back into the root of the project. That is still taking so long. I don't get why. External assets, delete that. So this is the general game structure that I see. And now I don't usually use underscore, I use exclamation because that shows up higher in the list. And you can just use an exclamation by itself. Where is it? Thank you. So this would have been the project structure for one that I would typically use. Now, this is a grain of salt thing, your organization. The key thing is to have a reason for it. So on this one, I fully support this. I love the idea of having a special character at the beginning of your code, at the beginning of your folder name so that your content stands out, and having it at the top. Now, the reason for having all these in their original spaces is so that when they do an upgrade, if you catch on to the fact that they even have an upgrade, there's not exactly like a great notification system in Unity assets to tell you unless the developer of that asset specifically programs something into it. All right, but once these are in here, if you go ahead and re-import it, it's going to try to re-import it into this exact same spot. So why keep messing with it? My general view on assets that you pull in is that you should not have to make any edits to those assets, because if you do, you lose the ability to pull in updates, and that can be kind of dangerous. You might decide that you want to update your code to URP. And I bring that up because URP hasn't existed that long, or some other feature, and then the asset updates to support that feature. And it would be a pain for you to go in manually and do it yourself, like upgrade someone else's assets to support URP when it wasn't originally built for it. So there's all sorts of reasons why you might change that, but that's whatever. I'll move on to another topic. Okay, so next, I had trouble figuring out what to start. Where does the scene start? And it feels like something is missing here. So let me go into this. What we see in here is levels. Now, the closest thing I found was start screen, that I assumed that was probably the start screen that we're actually doing. But I couldn't figure out which level I want to use, or need to use. Parents. Man, you've got scripts hiding all over the place. To be honest, that might be a little bit of a nightmare to try to navigate around, especially even for yourself after some time, trying to figure out where on earth is that script that was doing this. If you can find something else that's referencing it, you can find it. If you go into Visual Studio, you can search for it. But a lot of times that can be tough to find. So anyway, I still strongly recommend that you have your code. Like here you have missiles, so you have a prefab, you have a scene for missiles, you have scripts. Your scripts should still be inside of that one, and I'm going to stop moving these. Okay. Next thing in this is that you have prefabs, you have this stuff separated. Now, I am noticing a trend that I'll call out, that it does appear that you have a purpose for why you're putting things here. So you're saying that it seems to be split by domain segment. So in this case, you have building blocks. And so here are your building blocks. Over here you have lava. So here's your stuff related to lava. Here is a script related to lava. Here is because it only exists in one level. Here is a level that here's the actual scene that contains it. Actually, let me load that. I don't see anything. Maybe there's something missing that needs to be in here when it starts. Oh, lava, like it keeps going up. I don't see a visual for it. Woo, they exploded to confetti. Oh, that's a nice visual. I like this. I like the transition from scene to scene. That was nice. Okay. Anyway, then we have player 0 has a player dropper. Okay, I don't need to make edits here. Okay, middle ground. These blocks that they can jump from the different platforms. So thingy. Oh, this is your physics system. So you're deciding how things get moved and collide to each other and get connected. Okay. But back before I get into that, I do want to call out that I have seen this used, and while it can work successfully, it kind of works for the same reasons that Solid does, and that is something that breaks apart pretty easily under most updating project stresses. So Solid has this idea of single responsibility, that if you have a class in there that has one responsibility, it's going to be easier to figure out why it breaks down. It has one reason to break, one type of bug, even though it might have a variety of different errors it throws, but it has one specific effect on the system. Now, the problem is that you can't define what its single responsibility is because you only know its single responsibility according to that moment in time. As new features come in or change the game, that might literally split in half the responsibilities that you have. Or in some cases, there are things where you have pieces in this class and pieces in this class that need to be combined into one in order to make that single responsibility make more sense. The thing is that Solid is kind of implied in the name that it's trying to make your code more solid overall. But you don't know necessarily how that's going to split apart. So you have this specific code about lava goal, a specific goal. Now that's survival level goal. That's actually kind of I like the way that you've done this. But I don't recommend lumping your code content together like this. If you are going to do it, if you have a script that is very specific to a single scene, I do recommend including some sub stuff. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna change my mind on this. I can support this. Specifically because it's a custom piece and it's clearly importing survival level goal. So you're going into something that is classified as a survival level and it has a goal, and this is the condition that is met. So return player is in camera. Check if the player is eliminated. I like that setup, that structure for it. I can understand what this is trying to do very quickly and easily. Okay, so the physics and collision code is probably where I need to jump into because that was the specific request. But the organization, I am going to call out for when it is one specific thing like this that is for one specific scene and it's not going to jump out of it, then include it. And honestly, in your subfolders, if you have so little content inside of it, don't worry about separating it into separate folders. Anyway, the system that I do recommend using, you are partially using. So you have audio, you have prefabs, now you have scripts, you have settings. That's great stuff in there. And levels. You're putting your scenes inside of levels because all of your scenes technically are levels inside of this game. Okay, so I like those. I tend to like that format where you're separating things out like that. And I have also used the one where we do have custom scripts in there, but it is kind of as I was seeing from many of the other scripts that hide inside of these. So, okay, goals. Those are goals. What is this? Floor dropper. There's something unique about this one. This is an asset someone could pull into anywhere else inside of the game called floor dropper, but you have the script sitting here inside of drop floor. It seems, and I could be wrong here, but it seems like your code is in a design state where these are test levels. And maybe that's the case. And if that's the case, then whatever. The test code, if you're creating a proof of concept, create it any way you want. Don't worry about it. Okay, so now let's go on to physics and let's start taking a look at it. Now, this one has a thingy script. So what does this mean? What does this do? Keep in mind, I haven't talked with Sam about any of the details going on in here, so there's a lot of things I don't know. And that's one of the things I prefer in this case, just to review this code without having additional perspective on it. That it's just like I just sat down as a new developer in front of the code and I'm going to try to figure out how to add some new feature and what it takes to learn the code. I did ask if there was any documentation about this. I am not one that is a fan for documentation in most cases, but there are a few things such as architecture and general level layout that I think are important. Things where if you're going to get started on the project, you have to know this. So it's not detailed, it's not heavily, it doesn't have a lot of text. It's just a few notes that lay out, here's how our classes talk to each other. This is some key points in the architecture that are important to know about, some of the rules that we follow, a dialect, for instance. And then if there's specific things about the scene structure, key objects that you need to pay attention to. Now, I will call out that I'm used to seeing something in here called manager, or managers, or game, or some other object that sits right at the top that identifies these are the things that have kind of an overarching effect over the entire level. So camera control, or the camera doesn't have much there. There's all these things with, what's this stuff? This looks like what I'm looking for a manager. I would honestly just drag that up to the top of the scene. And then another thing is organize your scene differently. So you have objects, or let's see, we have interactive, and then we have, let's see, static elements. So static elements, it sounds like this middle ground object is all static elements, that these ones don't move. So then we also have another middle ground somewhere there. So these are the static elements of the level. And then create empty, let's say world, and inside of that I might have the main camera and any lights that show up. Okay, so, and I'm going to put my static elements in there as well. And left binder and right binder, I don't know what that is. Are those supposed to be touch buttons? No, they're interactive. Oh, and there's something over here too. Is that the lava that's supposed to be there? Am I in the lava world? Yeah, I'm in lava. And then there's lava, but for some reason it's over here. I'm guessing there's literally just some bug happening where the lava is supposed to be like right here. And for some reason it was over there. In fact, I'm just going to do a quick test and play. Oh, yeah, that's it. Oh, not quite. Did your physics system just get the cat stuck? Is that what's happening here? If I push the cat off, can the game continue? Okay. Wow. I'm guessing that was absolutely not the intent of the game design for when I was walking on lava, what appeared to be lava. Anyway, so I am very entertained by that. I do like your physics system. It's pretty interesting. But let's start diving into this. What's going on with this physics system? So we've got this thing called thingy. That seems to be your physics script. You've got a public enum for up, down, left, right. Okay, and then that's fine. I've seen some code advice in architectural planning, like the what was it, Microsoft's API design guideline and API design guideline digest, for instance, suggests a separate file for every one of your enums, every one of your interfaces, and I don't recommend that. My general recommendation is if you have a class that it's associated with in one place, put it there. If you end up getting multiple sets of classes afterwards that start using it, so if you have another class in here that uses it, because I see 40 references, but let's see. This one is for green box, ball. Okay, yeah, you have multiple sets of classes. I would recommend that this enum is housed somewhere else, just because of the fact it's used by multiple places. And so the fact that it's here with thingy. Now, at the same time, it's honestly not too big of a deal. The reason being is because any time that you're actually using it, let's see. Oh, that's a lot of comments in there. Let me find a use case for this. DIR. Okay, there's one way down there. Hey, I see you right there. Where's DIR? I don't see it in use. Oh well. Control F, DIR. It's in the comments. Wait. No? Okay, yeah, that's a little off. It looks like you're... Wait, where am I in the code? I'm not even in the thingy class anymore. Okay, I might have just lost track of it, but it does look like the dir in this case isn't even used inside of this class. Okay. So if that's the case, I don't see why it's here. All right, but that being said, inside of Unity, when you want to know where something is, you just select the type where it's referenced and hit F12, and that takes you there. So here's the basically the interface structure for Vector 2 without the code. Okay, or F12. Did I say F2? I meant F12. All right, so let's start taking a look through this. So we have box, public box, box. What is this? You're getting the box. Oh, got it. You're the box shape, a rectangle to basically use this. What is box then? Is this your own? Looks like it. Okay. All right, so it sounds like you're trying to use a bounding box or a rectangle inside of this. Now you can use one of the existing systems and just use which would allow you to pull in certain physics tools and math functions that are already available inside of Unity to help shortcut some of your code. I know some of the reasons, like when I first got into Unity, one of the big things I did was rewrite a lot of things. Like I made my own mesh deforming tools to go ahead and recreate an infinite procedural world. And I designed it in ways that were not designer friendly at all. I didn't really understand a lot of how Unity worked with that. But a lot of it I was reinventing wheels Unity already had because I already had systems that worked that I had developed from XNA and Visual Basic and Blitz and I think even Torque, but some other systems back from farther back before Unity. Okay, so anyway, these are good commands to have, but if finding out if two bounding boxes overlap, there's already functions for that inside of Unity. So if you were using a bounding box, so like public bounding box, what was it? Bounding box. I must not be. Hey, get rid of that. It's not bounding box. Is it rectangle? I guess just rectangle. There was something called a bounding box. Was that a collider? Anyway, but you can use rectangle, which has a lot of similar features in this. So if I go to rectangle, we can see all sorts of commands in here. Does it contain, does it overlap one rectangle with another? It has the Y minimum, X minimum, width, and height. And it's got a lot of stuff so you can automatically transfer it over to various Vector 2 states. So there's a lot of things you wouldn't have had to reinvent. And then an approach that you can do on top of that is that when you have some of these other functions in here, because it does appear that you have some other functions in here, like will overlap going down, this could have been changed into, let's see, on this one, public insert. Where's my insert function? There. Okay, public static bool. And then on this one, we're going to say, what was it? This rect r. Okay, so by adding something like this, even though we're not using it right now, or that this code is broken because I don't actually have all of these features available, it's inside of a static and we don't have min available, for instance, that would mean that from another thing, I could say rect r equals new rect, and just default all zeros, I guess. And then I'm going to say r dot will Oh, maybe it's not showing it because I can't compile here. Or, oh, one other thing, I believe it has to be in a static class. But you create a separate static class that holds it, and you can create overloaded functions. And then, of course, as I was mentioning, commands like overlap would already be there. There'd already be other source codes so that when you're searching for results, you can find ways of doing things that Unity just supports out of the box. And in general, I would tend to believe that if Unity has code in there specifically to do something, it is designed to be much more performant. That it is happening potentially lower level, or that it's just something that they've had multiple people likely take a look at the math of this to make sure that the speed is very performant, the resources are low, that they're making decisions on it towards key guidelines in performance and necessity for Unity. So recreating your own in a lot of cases does not lend you any improvement. Now, that being said, I absolutely have replaced sections of Unity's physics just because as soon as I turned on their physics for a way that I was trying to work with something, it had 300 million calls being that it was checking physics for, and it just didn't work, and I had to use a lighter weight system, something that did only what I asked it to do. Okay, so there's reasons, and I can't say what your reasons are, but the game does appear to be lighter in what it's doing and not a performance drain or hog, so I'm guessing that a lot of this stuff wasn't necessary. That being said, I will also say that there is a lot of valid reason, especially on personal projects, to completely reinvent the wheels. That things already exist, but create your own so you can see how it works, so you can, so that you're working inside of an element that you're more comfortable in and feel like you're accomplishing stuff, and that you've already done this. It's from what I'm seeing in the code, it looks like you came into Unity already knowing how to do this stuff and then are just adapting your knowledge to Unity. So there's a lot of reason to just reinvent your own stuff, and I'm not so much opposed to that, but I would say that in this case, I feel like it probably would have been better to learn some of Unity's features for it. Okay, now that being said, these are not changes I'm going to continue with in the code. Let's get rid of my statics. Let's just get rid of all the changes I just made to here. Okay. Cool. All right, so I like that you have all these commands in here, that you have all these additional commands that help you directly off of it. Will overlap going down. That's interesting. That's an interesting command. So will something overlap it if it goes down? So I'm assuming it's testing something to see if it's within the bounding or within the box with the rectangle, if there's going to be a collision after the fact. What is kind of surprising me here is that you're repeating all these commands, all these parts of it, without having a sub-command that kind of puts that together. Because if you ever change your structure of this, if you create a separate circular one, you're recreating the wheels. Whereas you could have something in here, this is for working with a box. You could have something that takes in a shape, for instance, and now your shape has circles, whatever, and you're testing to see, is there an overlap on this? How much distance am I going down? Should I check that? Now, at the same time, there might be very significant differences in how you would use a circle inside your code. So again, with most of my comments, these are things that you don't necessarily have to worry about as long as you've got decisions for reasons why you're specifically doing it. As opposed to just doing things ad hoc. If you're just doing things ad hoc and don't have specific reasons why you're doing this versus trying to use the Unity system for it, then, or in the case, maybe you just didn't know about the rectangles inside of Unity, or the feature to overlap the functions. Well, in that case, you still could have created helper functions. So that would have, whatever the case. But as long as you've got reasons for driving why you're building something in a certain way and it works, awesome. Okay, so that was one thing. Let's see. What was I looking at? I was looking at box. Now let's go back to thingy. Okay, so inside of this, we have the direction up, down, left, right. All right. And then it doesn't appear to be used in this class. Maybe it'll be found, and I just didn't find it when I was first doing my searches here. Okay, so box. We are getting a box. We're assembling one with a lot of math here. This kind of feels like this math of assembling the box should be put inside of a constructor for box. That you're doing a lot of math to define what it is, the vector 2 is going into it, instead of just passing in positions. Now you are using local scale. It's interesting that you're using local scale on this. Local position and local scale, so its parent, whatever parent you're applying it to, matters, as opposed to lossy scale and just position. That's its position within the world and its scale within the world. So not caring about what a parent is. So just as a comment on it, that the parents usually, if you end up changing out the parents or changing the size of it, a parent, that will change all of the child elements when you're basing it off of local scale. And maybe that's exactly what you're trying to do. Maybe that's exactly what you want. But it didn't seem like, in most cases, this is something I rarely touch in my code. And I'm not necessarily sure it was necessary here, but I don't know exactly what it's doing. Okay, EV. EV is short for evolution. Higher classes of evolution are more affected by other classes of evolutions. I love this comment. Okay, I'm going to call out that this is a great comment to have because the bad comments are the ones that we write when we're first learning. You shouldn't write a comment. If you're learning, put those comments in, the simple comments that talk about what a piece of code is trying to do, that I'm trying to put in something that writes a line of code or that writes a line out to the console. That is something that makes sense only when you are first learning it, as a way to re-emphasize and reiterate in your head what is happening there, and so that you can look back and kind of see, oh, that code was doing this one was trying to do that. Okay, good. I get more understanding of it. They're learning tools. But when you actually get, very seldom do places talk about this, but in your comments, what you should be doing is commenting on the business logic, the rules of the game, the mechanics. Why do you have this code here? What is it trying to do in a sense of an external user just trying to understand what's happening, as opposed to specifically what your code is doing line by line. So this is perfect. This one, it sounds like there's more things going on. Now, I do want to call out here that since you have so many notes here, I would actually use an XML comment. So 3 slashes, and that puts that here. So great. I'm just going to take this, Control-C, and put it here. Did I put that in the right spot? Let's find out. I did. Yay. So I'm going to get rid of that one. Wahoo. And now I'm going to do the same thing here. / summary. And this one is going to be here. And I'm not even going to take the full sentence. It's just this, completely removable objects. So now when I'm somewhere else inside of the code, and let's go home, and I say EV, now look at this. EV has the content there, so it's not just a note that is inside of that piece of code. A general rule that I try to say in coding practices is that when you shouldn't have to look inside of the code in order to figure out what it does. So when I'm here, I see EV, and now I know what it's doing. In fact, I probably would have literally called this evolution. That unless everyone that's part of your project understands EV as specifically meaning this, that these phrases, the shortcuts you use for things, can very quickly lose meaning. Same thing for thingy. That doesn't make as much sense. I would have choose something like physics bounds or something along those lines, or maybe even just physics. Okay, but EV, and now when I say EV dot, and what was it? Static is the one that I pushed on here. So static, completely immovable objects, i.e. ground floor. Perfect. That gives me this information from anywhere in the code that I use it. Additionally, this also has another object in it that it becomes valuable here. So I'm going to put another one. Oops. Comments, or not comments. Remarks might be a good one, but there's other things in here like C, so you can reference other pieces of code. But let's see. I want remarks, and I'm going to put remarks in here. And then we have this thing. an important note about gravity. Ooh, actually that'd be better to be remarks on gravity. Okay, so let's grab this stuff. Control C, and then over here on gravity, I'm going to put this in here as ... and I'm going to forget that one, and I'm just going to put in remarks. Okay, and enter and home. Okay, so let's expand that out a little bit so I get more stuff here. And then I want to add the extra slash, get rid of the opening one. Okay, so now on gravity, when I get to here and I say ev.gravity, oh, these ones don't support it? Really? Oh, Visual Studio, you have missed out. Wow, okay. So it supports XML comments and the summary for these individual items, but doesn't give you the extra details. That would have been a perfect place to put this. Now, that being said, I could take all of this content and put it inside of summary instead. So I'll just take this tag, put it down here, and then get rid of these two. Okay, and then I go back up here and I go to ev.gravity. Okay. There. So I could have started out with the first line being that key explanation, that first explanation like we had for static. And then on a new line, here's all these additional extra details. That is a great way to do this because now anytime that you're coding this, you have a reference and an understanding of what you were implying by the individual things. As it is now, the way it's set up, if people want to know this, they have to go dive into the enum. But why would they look if most things inside this don't have comments? Okay. So, all right. To-do. Ooh, I love the to-do. That's a great thing to add. If you're not familiar with to-dos, inside of Visual Studio, you can go to View and then, what was it? Not notifications, output, task list. You go to task list and all the to-dos show up. That's awesome. That's exactly what I'd be looking for. Okay, now the thing is that this is an obscure visual. So I have my own personal item that I add on top of it, and this is just my own thing. But when I'm putting in a to-do statement like this, let me hit enter just so it's on a new line. I actually prefer doing it this way. #warning / to-do. Now what happens with this is that the to-do line still shows up down here. So it's remove this entirely. Let's see. Remove this entirely. So that should be the one. Thingy.cs line 66. There it is. Oh yeah, so if I click on one of these, it takes me to the line of code. If I click on that, you can see it brought me back here. So it's, again, great task list to identify in your code. But this is not here by default, and unless somebody has been shown it and understands to look for it, they're typically not going to. But when you try to build, your warnings show up. Check that out. Warning, to do, remove this entirely. Okay, that is a way to guarantee it shows up in both lists. And personally, I tend to find that developers don't like a lot of warnings showing up. There's a point in your project where it becomes overwhelming, but then that becomes a sign of really bad technical debt that you need to get caught up on. So anyway, I prefer using the #warning because that keeps reminding me every single time I build it, every time I run it, that there's a warning. There's something that needs to get updated. Okay, and if you have too many of them, again, tech debt is increasing. Keep that in mind. All right, has gravity. Remove this entirely with any reference to it. Replace with checking the evolution. Okay, I'm not sure what that means, but I'm assuming with a little more domain knowledge of the project that I would. Okay, clear thingies. What? Clear thingies. Is there a list of this? Collision handlers. You have your own collision handler class. Okay, that makes sense. You're doing your own physics, so you have a collision handler. I have to say that the naming convention, I definitely get having certain variables that you just call out, and this is the default. And I do, if I recall right, Sam actually told me that the name thingy is going to stand out in here, and it just happens to be one of the nomenclature he uses to define how he refers to things by default. So if he's just writing up code real fast, doesn't have a lot of perception onto where it's going yet, he might just start throwing in a variable. I've had other friends who have referred to the default things they start with their code as foobar, that everything is foobar until you figure out what it is. And maybe there's some logic to that, I don't know. But now we end up with functions called clear thingies. So unless you understand the nomenclature around thingies, this is a confusing line to me. Generally, most of your stuff is following a good setup here. So aside from thingy and, box makes sense. EV. Oh, I have code in here that is doing things that I don't want it to. I don't want to break the code while I'm experimenting with this, otherwise I'll get errors that aren't a real error. Okay, let's see. But this is more confusing. Also, there's a standard that most of the time you put your static operations either at the top or the bottom of your project. I usually go with the top of the class file. So static things show up first. Second thing I want to call out is this is really long. This is like 700 or 800 lines. So even though I disagree in general with the idea of SRP, like I still think we should be applying it, but I think it's not necessarily something that is that makes a lot of sense to go really strict with. That being said, 800 lines inside of a single file is a really good red flag that there's too much going on inside of here. So let's take a look at this. So we've got all these commands in here like friction, gravity, down collisions, default gravity, deactivate. Deactivate is probably not yours. Commit shift up, commit shift right, commit shift left, clear thingies, follow left, relative down, relative left. There's a lot of things in here, and without XML comments on them, that's going to get lost really quickly as to what their purpose is. Because there's so many overlapping terms. Now, at the same time, you could have separate tool classes. You could have separate classes that help support this. So relative up distance that I don't know, maybe that's part of some additional series of tools on this stuff. Now, at the same time that I'm saying this, these are all dealing directly with your physics system. So if thingy literally is your key physics operation, which typically I would recommend for a physics system that you have at least a separation from here is a physical object and how I define a physical object and some conditions about how an overlap might operate versus here is functionality to do advanced detection, such as when you had like downward checks, for instance, which I believe was used to check if something is closer, if it's going to collide with the ground. So you're doing if something will collide in the next frame or something will collide if it continues in a particular path. Okay. So let's see. Anyway, like right here, again, XML comment. This would be great for an XML comment. I picked relative down, but that landed right next to here where you were very close to that potential. So XML comments for things that you want to explain. Now the fact, again, you called this out as business logic of what its purpose was within the world, not just a list of the steps you did inside of code. Great use of comments. But change this over to XML comments. It's invaluable, especially as you start increasing your project size or having to try to remember why on earth you even had this function. What's also good to call out inside of these when you add things like remarks. Remarks, by the way, do show up for method names and field names. It apparently just doesn't show up for the attributes of enums. I'm surprised. I haven't really tried it. I've only used the title tag on it until now. But I haven't been faced with something where a particular enum has so much state logic with it that makes it operate differently. Whereas clearly the ev.gravity in yours had a lot of things that made it unique. Okay. Yeah. So another approach that you might want to do with this is actually splitting these out, for instance, your different states of physics, because it looks like you're using this. Let's go back up here. There, EV, so the evolution, the higher classes. All right, so first off, one thing right away, you're using 0, 1, 2, 3. 3 tells me that you're not using bit flags. And because of that, because of that, well, why was I bringing up bit flags? Because this indicates that there is literally only one state something can have. Now, a way that you can support this as well is you could have it as a dropdown, but you can also, it sounds like these different items might have notably different physical operations and could have different attributes about how that work. For instance, sticky might have a weight class to it, or might have some other pieces of information that define how it works. So does sticky have a change to how you jump? Does sticky have other effects? So it might be good that these are literally separate objects, such as scriptable objects, that define these are your evolutions. You have an evolution scriptable and then you have a static evolution that inherits from evolution. And then you can place those and drag those into the features and objects that you want. So you basically just drop this object into the scene, and then you drag over that it is sticky. Now, of course, you've also got a drop down, so that puts that stuff in there. But that is going to give your ability to have more details in the comments, and you can put details and explanation into the designer. So let's go back over to this. So on this one, we see here are your evolutions. None of the notes are available here. I don't get to see what they are. Now, I honestly don't know if tooltips are support. I want to check that. That's another thing. So when things are exposed inside of Unity, an alternative here is that we don't call out the summary here. We could, but you can also do this. Tooltip. So tooltip, and I'm going to say this one. Whoops. Oh, I've got quotes in here. That's what's going on. All right. So I've added a tooltip to this. Why is it complaining? Is only valid on declaration types. Oh, got it. I'm putting it in the wrong spot. So let's find out what's using it. Control C, Control X. I want to get rid of that. EV. Wait, what? Oh, it's down here. All right, Control V. There. So now when I return to Unity, over here, I move my mouse over evolution. Evolution. There we go. And I get the tooltip on it. That's a useful thing, so I can get more explanation out to the designer. So if a designer joins your world, then you've got additional features that makes it easier. Now, I recommend that's one of Unity's key strengths, where a lot of frameworks don't have design tools sitting in front of it. Unity does, and so I strongly recommend sticking to its strengths, and when you have the chance, put that out there. Now, at the same time, that's a choice, so you can view this as a choice to make. Like this one calls out exactly what we're using it for. Every one of these would be great to also have a summary tag that basically says what it's for. Now, that being said, I do want to clarify that if it is obvious enough, if it makes enough sense just by looking at it, you're done. You don't need an XML comment. You don't need a tooltip. If there is a jump script and one of it says upward force, that might be enough. Or how high in meters. You spell something out for the variable name, and that makes a lot of sense. That works. You don't need to call everything out. But this one, collision handler CH, where is that? CH, collision handler. I guess I can tell by looking at the field that this says collision handler. It's a collision handler. So let's find out that collision handler. We've got different things here. Interesting. So is that an extra script sitting here? Collision handler. I think I just mangled the L's in there. It feels like it. Collision handler. Collision handler. Okay, I don't feel like I mangled them this time, but which probably means that I did mangle it. Okay. All right, so anyway, what are the purposes here? You've got attributes. Ooh. Attributes. Ooh, I like this one. Okay, I like where this is going. So these are scriptables. So we have frictionless. We have this. We have Oh, I love this. Okay, let's go take a look at where this is. If I add frictionless to this, and then I head over to it, that selects it over there. There we have them. They're sitting as building blocks, thingy attributes. Cool. Frictionless. Gravity has a air friction of 0, and gravity of -1. -1. Why -1? Now I'm interested in your gravity system. Why gravity wouldn't be 0 for frictionless? -1 would imply that your character is reverse floating. They're reversing gravity by default, so they just flow upward. Okay, so anyway, then there's also static. Something stays still, it doesn't move. Something stays still, it doesn't move. Why does the other one have negative for gravity? I don't understand that. That one's throwing me off. Okay, so static is something that stays there. It doesn't move. Okay, volleyball has a gravity of 0.015. Okay, I'm really curious in the gravity. I have to go take a look at this now. What is using gravity? Let's go find this. Find me references. Okay, there we go. If default gravity is -1, then we're automatically setting stuff. If it was null, then we're applying it and figuring it out. In this case, I got to question why you're putting in the defaults here. One thing that I would recommend is that if something is null like this, maybe you've got very clear reason. And so I don't have enough information, but the implications that seem to be coming from this is that the attributes haven't been defined, so you're going to use pieces of information from it to define what it should be, what their gravity is, what their content is. So if default gravity is -1, you're applying this. If default friction equals -1, so what if these? Oh, you don't necessarily know what they are. So if they're null. Now you're doing another check here, and you're doing it again. Why did you set it here? You set default gravity here if this is the case. So if these are null, and then you do the exact same thing again. So my question is, why is this piece of code even necessary? I cannot think of a reason unless getting this, which it looks like it's just a field. Yeah, it's just a field. Acquiring this shouldn't do anything. Yeah, okay. So you end up getting those attributes, but that doesn't... Game thingy attributes, level thingy attributes. Okay, got it. That's pulling it from different sources. So you pull it from here, but then it doesn't matter if you pull it from here because you overwrite it next. If default gravity is here, then we're just going to replace default gravity with this one. So this one never does a thing. If this one is null, it doesn't do a thing. I can't understand why that's there. Like that, maybe there was some other reason for it before, and this is just a glitch that it wasn't erased. Maybe I'm missing something obvious. Maybe I need a rubber duck to just walk through it with. But okay, so that was thingy, line 226 to 231. Okay, then you reset attributes. Reset attributes, gravity. Oh, got it. So you're figuring out your defaults. And then, which are always going to be the game thingy attributes and not the level. Were these intended to be reversed order? So you check these ones first, but then if the level thingy attributes are not null, then you intend to use those? That kind of feels like that was the order it was intended. Okay, anyway, update physics. You check collisions. All right, let's go find that. I can understand wanting to implement your own physics system. I don't have any complaints about that. Unity's physics is great, but it's very generic, which means that they're spending resources on things that your game might have no concerns at all about. Okay, check if we're still colliding with objects that we were previously colliding with. So that's interesting. It feels like this should be check past collisions, because that kind of clarifies that you're looking at stuff that you've already collided with. Whereas when I was looking at this in the code where it was being called and I see this line, this makes me think that check collisions implies that it's checking all collision states at that point in time. Okay, so next there should be something in here that checks new collisions. What are all these things? Thingy. So each one of the thingy objects has an update to physics. What's calling update physics? Okay, I need to look this up. Update physics is going on in fixed updates. So this is happening potentially multiple times a frame, depending on the speed that you have things set up with. So I'm having a little confusion trying to understand your purpose here. Update all thingies. So it updates all thingies. What? So whether or not something is in view, it's still being updated and checked for collisions. That's kind of a valid question, because if you have an object resting on another object, you need to define whether or not that's blocking it. But it seems like you're spending money on or spending resources where you don't need to. Now, I could be wrong here. You might have a rest state in your physics, that it might switch it to static. I don't know how that was operating. But do you have a rest mode or not? And it kind of looks like there's not from initially checking it. It's literally updating it every single frame for all physics. Now, that is more the idea of how physics work in the world, but absolutely not how it's needed for a game. Okay. You should let the code rest whenever it can. Of course, I'm just glancing at the code. Okay, so physics updates, and then let's go back to thingy here. Okay, is stuck. We're checking if it's sticky. Are we stuck? Sticky push. What is sticky push? That name, it's interesting. I mean, push right, push left. Vector. Wait, what's vector? Vector doesn't really have a purpose of what its naming convention here. So inside of this, that wasn't where it was being used. I'm going to go back. Not there. Here we go. We're passing it sticky velocity. Sticky velocity equals stuck thingy current movement dot x. Okay, so your current movement, you're grabbing the object's current movement, doesn't move around. Except it sounds like it's a stuck thingy. Okay, some of the naming here is just confusing me for throwing this off. Yeah, I would really go through, like, naming is very easy to change. So inside of here, I can just come in here and say thingy is now going to be, first of all, let's copy that and say thingy is now going to be physics object. Okay, and then control. Wait. Was that it? No, there was something. Unity engine dot. I don't have Unity engine in here? What's going on? Unity engine could not be found. Oh, this has to do with changes in the code, right? Get rid of all things that I have put in here because I have broken code, so I can't put anything else in there. Okay, so this class name, you're calling it thingy. We're going to call it, let's see, physics object. Okay. Oh, yeah, and now control dot. There we go. Rename thingy to physics object. So that goes through the rest of your code and does that. Now the scene is still going to be confused because it no longer knows what physics object is. So before we go back into the code, now I'm going to put in here also known as, or known Unity engine dot formerly serialized. Why is it here? Oh, that's serialization. That's why it couldn't find it. Okay. Formerly serialized as thingy. What else do you need to know? comma. That's it. Old name. Formerly serialized. The name of the field. Oh. Okay, well, a class gets a unique GUID. So that one might actually just update as is. I might be barking up the wrong tree here. Let's go back into Unity and see what Unity says. So if I come into here and I select one of these objects, one of these static elements inside of the world. Middle ground. Script is missing. Script is missing. Okay. So this was originally looking for something called thingy, but now it can't find anything called, oh, it's not going to be able to either. Because, where's my code? This object here is called thingy still, so Unity doesn't recognize it. So I'm going to change its name here as well. Control C and go into this one. Physics object. I copy and paste rather than type that one in particular, just to guarantee that I didn't get a typo and miss a letter. I don't want to have that mistake show up or be the reason why something isn't working. Okay, so returning to Unity, does it update the fact that, of what that script is called now? There it is, physics object. It just updated automatically inside of here. So you can change the names out of these things. If you have other fields like evolution, which I understand why you split this out, but I would call out that there is another feature available, like instead of shortening this to EV, as you have it over here, like this could be evolution types. So now I go back into Unity. Where's my Alt tab? There. Okay, evolution static by default. It should carry that one over without any issue. Okay, so yeah, now it's a much more easily named one, understood of evolutions. I do like the fact that in this one it does include it under physics object, that the evolutions directly relates to that, so you actually have it inside of the physics object. That's great for a Unity project. And now anytime something else want to reference it, it references physics object dot evolutions. Same thing for your fields over here, where you're actually calling fields inside of evolution. If we were to change the name of this to say, well, first off, let me copy what's already there. And let's do this one. Name, what was this? Physics state. We change it to physics state, and then I go up to here, and then I say, formerly serialized as, all right, evolution. Now when I return into here, I can change the names of these fields. Evolution does not exist in the current context. Oh, really? You're going to do that to me? Why is... $410. Oh, I see what I did. I didn't do the rename on this. So when I did that, let's do that. Whatever. So everything's back as is, but that's where you would use the formerly serialized for the name fields. A separate thing is, I would recommend putting your organization so that you have the script, the fields up at the top. Private, I don't honestly care if it's like private and then public, but I do generally tend to recommend that you have either your private or public first, and then your the whatever is next in the net going after that. And I don't care about the order. I would say that one, that you stay alphabetical within that region, especially when you have a lot of different states that it could be. So you have all these different fields here. Now, this could be a little bit different. Because you might have the order based on what makes most sense to a designer, that they're going to look for default friction or friction first, default air friction or air friction. And it's reasonable to have these, but you're also doing a lot of double variables in here. This might be a reasonable thing to produce a separate object for. Actually, I would recommend an observable for this. So an observable, for instance, if you change the value of an observable object, or the pattern for observable, then you will end up getting that pattern to flow through the rest of the stuff right away. Now, you're using fields in here, so you're not going to be able to detect those changes. So that's unless you have another mechanism in it. But that would allow you to do things inside of your game like change something live. Or as you enter a level, it now just drags over this additional setting. What these settings are, I find them great just to... Oh, that's right. You are pulling these in from something else, like thingy attributes. And then you're setting what they are, but it's hidden in Inspector. Okay, I'm not going to comment on this because I don't necessarily understand the level of what you're trying to do. And thingy attributes sounds like it's going to be a scriptable object. Let's go into their scriptable object. All right, so there's your default settings. Woohoo! Look at all these notes in here. That's nice. Again, XML comments would be great. Okay, also something else you can do inside of this. I don't know a good way inside of here, but we could do this, I believe. Header. I've never actually tried this because I usually don't have comments this long going into this. All right, but I'm going to put these over here. Control C. And now I'm going to try putting a second header on here. I have no idea if this is going to work or what the outcome is going to be, but I want to try it just because I haven't tried it before. Because if you want to have multiple stuff in here, this might actually be a great mechanism for it. So thingy attributes, let's return to Unity. And hopefully I have no more exceptions in the code. It might complain about multiple header attributes. Okay, so now let's go to here. And it seems like I've destroyed whatever this script is referencing. It's, oh, your physics object. What did it destroy? Oh, yeah, I just updated the scene. Let's go to here and right-click, discard changes. Okay, middle ground. Physics object. No, discard the changes. That's not it anymore. Did I save it? I must have saved it. Oh, well, I can reload from the defaults. That's not what matters here. Let's go find this stuff. Frictionless. Woohoo! Check it out. Headers, multiple lines. It's there. So all of these things could just end up being their own line in here too. Blah, blah, blah. Control C, and let's put this on here. Again, another header. Okay, now this also does face a separate issue that's in here. So when we're inside of this and we're seeing it, I don't believe headers wrap. I need to check that. No, headers don't wrap. That means that you need to literally have it spread out farther to be able to see that whole line. But you could split this into multiple lines as well. Now, at the same time, you have a lot of explanation for things hidden inside of your code. I strongly recommend getting that out of there and starting to put that into some documentation separate from this. A great way to do that, for instance, when you have a relative path in your system. So if you're developing on Windows, for instance, your path can have these attributes in it where it can say percent, swindle path, or party, what were you calling it? Party platformer. So percent party platformer folder percent, and then you put in /assets whatever / /games /scripts /myscript.cs. And you can link from your stuff directly into those. That way your local system from your documentation can actually pull that stuff up very easily. And then just put in, have another batch script or something else that adds those to your system. That's a way to organize it in larger scale. Otherwise, just listing the file name and saying that you can find out about it in this one. But it really seems like you could deal with having some form of a level of documentation on it. Another way that you can do this is, one thing that I do in a lot of my projects, and I'm just going to pull this up as a reference right now. Let's see, over here. Sure, let's pull up a new visual on this one. I'm going to go to Slides and RTS 21 Architectural Digest. So this is a common thing that I create for the projects that I'm doing. where when I have a new architecture or a way that something works, I will generally create an explanation of that, a high-level explanation of that, just a single slide that defines the general idea of how it works. Like Locator has more commands in this, but I actually call out what it is. And then for this particular project, for RTS21, I had a private YouTube video. Now it's a private YouTube video, and now it's public to anyone who wants to click on it. But it basically walks through inside of the code for that project, which was another personal project of mine, me talking about this, talking about the solution and how it's implemented. So there's a walkthrough that's just associated with it for more detail and explanation. Anyway, but I pose what is the challenge, what is the solution in general, and then how it gets used in this project in general. What are some of the key things? And if need be, down in the notes, I might include some more details. No, come back. Somehow I got rid of my text comments, and I don't know how to put them back. View, full screen, text, motion, slideshow, no. Tools. I lost my notes. Great. Okay. Slide. Edit theme, skip slide, theme. How do I get my notes back? Comment history, present to a meeting. Is that this? Oh, yes. Okay, good. There it is. But any extra details put down in here when it goes a little farther. So when I had more notes on this, like if you're not familiar with Locator service locator, decoupling patterns. Here is a place you can go to see about how that pattern works. Now I know a general way of communicating inside of my project, and I can make sure all my architecture sticks to that. From talking to you, you mentioned that you didn't have anything for it. Now, if this is a proof of concept, then don't worry about it. But from the amount of code going into this physics engine, it seems like the intent is to have something larger. Okay, let's see. So that's one thing. Now, another value for this is that projects change. The structure of them change all the time, and what that means, how the code is supposed to be written out. So if you end up having all of your architecture listed off in this, it makes it a lot easier for when things do change, as they inevitably do, that you can identify where does it break your current architecture. Like we're currently using Locator service, or in some of my other ones that we have Observables being a common one. So pretty much every project that I do, I end up generating something like this. Not so much for the brownfield projects that have already been in existence that I joined for a client, just because the architectures are usually so chaotic. But I usually try to develop emphasize the ones that I'm building up and where I would hope that it goes. And then as I learn more of the ones that are in there, I start to build it up for it. But I've never completed one for a brownfield project. Okay, but observables, for instance. Let's say that I know this stuff works, but I need something else. Like I need an observable that is literally does not have a type. It is a key event that is named, or it's literally just an event. It doesn't have a set or a get. There's no value change to it. So maybe I want something like that. Now, maybe I don't want to use static events. I say that I want that, and then I go through the list of architectural choices and patterns that we already have, and I find, we do have state events. So basically just static class name, and then I can trigger an event that is literally just a class name, or an interface that doesn't even have a class associated with it. And that triggers an event to anything else listening for something to be triggering that. Such as end level or save level, that it doesn't care who's sending it out or any details about it. It just knows save the state of the level so that it can be loaded again later. Or whatever other information that you need. And it just calls on whatever it needs to do that. Okay. Or maybe we didn't have one in there and we're figuring, can we change observables to cover it? So we're looking at it, and that gives us an idea like, we can just add a function onto this one where we add a trigger command, static t trigger. .trigger, and that triggers an announcement for it. So you can wire up a listener for it, and that'll wire up for changes, and it'll wire up for an event call directly against the type itself. And that might be a reasonable way to change observables, to have a kind of a root event that it can trigger. As opposed to having static events, which basically does about the same thing and might be easy to implement inside of the observable system. Whatever the case is, but you might end up having other code that jumps in. Now, I'm going into theoretical stuff on what your project has or needs, and not so much addressing the project itself. Okay, but you can see from this stuff that we can use headers to attach extra comments onto this. You can also add note fields. I do recommend things like Odin. Odin is incredibly awesome for adding specialized attributes and character features or systems to this. Now, Odin is a paid system, but I still recommend it. It's like $50 an asset, but they go on sale probably like 3 or 4 times a year in various promotions from Unity. And it is just... Odin should be part of what Unity has by default. Honestly, Unity should buy Odin and hire the developers to come work for them. Of course, offering them a reasonable, making them a nice offer for purchasing out Odin as well. But yeah, buying Odin and getting the developers in there, and that should become some of the new basics for Unity. But you'd be able to do all sorts of stuff like this and have it very clean inside of Unity, very straightforward without much work. I would love to see that as part of Unity by default. Okay. So now player 0, player whatever. I do like the fact that you have prefabs here. I do want to check something on this though. This is important. This is an area where things commonly break down. Overrides. No overrides. Woohoo! No overrides. Woohoo! Overrides. Okay. So this is something when Unity introduced its new nested prefab system, it potentially it breaks things for so many projects if you are not actively checking this or rigorously checking this. So before every commit, check it. I wish they had a tool in here, but I have not seen one. Hey, tool developers, if somebody on the asset store wants to make something for the asset store, a great item would be that if you can detect when there's going to be a collaborate or have some execute button that you can check states on things and maybe implement your own checks, that one of the checks that would be great would be checking overrides to see if there are things inside of it and marking them. And then also putting flags on these individual checks to see should I ignore them from now on. So let's check out what these ones are. So on this one, we see that our level settings, we changed our player count to 4, and that's it. That's the only change that we made. That might be reasonable because the player count on the default prefab doesn't really matter. Okay, drop floor goal. That you've added drop floor goal to this one. Okay, that's reasonable. Overrides in this are good. Awesome, great use of it. Okay, these are not ones that you would want to apply to the default prefab. Now, another thing that you could do is you can create a separate prefab from this. So let me go find this. Let's select that one, and that's over here. Here's your scene manager. Now inside of it, this is your code. I drag that over here so you have a prefab sitting inside of here. Another thing that you might do here is I take this one and I'm going to drag this over to Scene Manager, and I want to create a prefab variant. This is a great place for a prefab variant because now this one has no overrides. I have declared that this is exactly set up how it should be, that there are 4 items in this. Now, it still loses the attributes where it's something in the scene being set. But that's another area where you can, there's observables that you can use inside of this. Now, I use a version of observables inside of my content. I'm going to suggest a specific video to check out, though, for Unity on this one. Let me go to my channel. It's not one of my videos. It was at Unite, Austin 2017, Game Architecture with Scriptable Objects. This video right here is pretty awesome for covering a lot of stuff. Now, what he did in this code and his team did, I think was overkill. And there were a few areas where I think that like doing the property drawers and having all those being laid out in this as well, it was a nice feature. And kudos for it, but honestly, there were so many different confusions on it that it made it kind of tough. So I don't recommend following the property drawer setup of this. It does produce a lot of work to make it work properly inside of Unity. But something very similar is... I use something I called variables that are based off of almost the same code that he had. So let's see. Do I have a project that's up and running? I don't have variables in here, do I? No, I don't. Do I have another project? Let's open Unity Hub and find out for a second. CN18. I'm probably using it in CN18, Infinite City, RTS21. I'm definitely using it in RTS21, so I'll load that. All right, but RTS21 is also a little longer. I'm dragging this up here. It showed up on my main window. All right, anyway, but this one is almost done. So I'm just gonna show this last part and then come back to it. So that's also under projects. I could probably load up Visual Studio in the meantime with it. Do I have RTS21? I do. So I have Visual Studio loading for it. You can load at the same time and it doesn't have to worry about all the models it's dealing with. Okay, so inside of here, inside of my scripts folders, so you can see RTS21, I have fonts in here, which has some text files that shows up here. But then under scripts, I have AI, architecture, data, units, tasks, simple, etc. Data is the one I'm looking for. So these are variables. Everything in here is a variable, and it inherits from Scriptable Object. I just have empty variable, and I can generate it. It has nothing special about it. Why do I even have empty variable? Am I inheriting from that? I am not. That really makes me wonder about empty variable. I must have had something in it before that I'm not using anymore. Okay, but I don't know why I have empty variable, and that's something in my own code I'm going to have to get rid of. But the idea here is that let's say that we have a Boolean variable. And again, here is a YouTube video. That's a great use in this, that when you're talking about stuff, I put in a help URL. So if anybody is looking at a Boolean variable inside of the code, which is still loading, that when they pull it up, there's a help button in the corner. And if somebody clicks on it, just that default help button inside of Unity, for that object, it pulls up this YouTube video that walks through the construction of it. That is a great thing to add. I do recommend adding stuff like that and recording a YouTube video of yourself talking through this stuff. That's a great way just to keep track of it yourself. Okay, RTS21 just came up. Great. Pull that up and then... Where is my code? What is happening? Why is Thank you. Okay, let's go to data. So RTS21 data, and then let's see, selection tech tree. That has Booleans. Units selected, base selected. Okay, this is a Boolean variable. Now, if I click this question, this help box up here, it brings me to a YouTube video where I'm actually talking about how to use this. Now, I don't care about sharing that one right now, but that was for that project on how it worked. Anyway, but in this one, it also has default value, current value like you were using in your physics system. But that might still be best just to have applied. Anyway, so I have this passed off to a scriptable object that holds on to it. Then I have information, numbers 1 to 5, which... Why on earth do I have numbers 1 to 5 as part of Boolean? What on earth is using this? Nothing inside of here. Wow, why is this there? I must have been demonstrating something in another piece of code. I will assume that it is that, but that obviously isn't needed. Okay, so basic observable. Observable, I have a default field, which I have serialized and private, so nothing else can get access to it. Same thing for the current value. So private value and current value. Now the fields are exposed so that Unity can see them. We can see them and edit them here. But then I have on disable, On disable, when it disables, I take the current value and reset it to default value. That's when it returns back to like Unity's editor by default. So once I return to the editor, I don't want it to save that as its current state. I don't want it returning there. All right, but we can add listeners. So if something so chooses to, it can listen to when a base selected gets changed. If that gets changed, it will be alerted to it. So basically, we set a value, and we set the value right here. Now, I'm using a property, public property, so any other code that works with this, it can't work directly with the fields. Instead, it changes it here. Now, ideally, I might also put in an onValidate, so private void onValidate. So on validate, I might actually trigger the listener as well. So where am I calling it? So here, this dot listeners value. That just implies that I changed something about this. So what was that? Oh, that's value, capital value. All right, so that calls out that the value got changed in the IDE and automatically triggers it. And I should have added that to begin with. Anyway, so anytime this changes inside of my code, I can listen to it and find out about those changes. But why was I calling that out? I feel like there was something inside of your code that I saw that made me want to call that out. I was looking at your scriptable objects. So platform level change, not that one. A reason why instead of referring to other objects within the scene on a prefab, because that is a major fault of prefabs in my opinion, the fact that it loses its scene state, what scene object it's referencing. What might be a really easy thing for Unity to do is actually store separate scene state information for every scene it goes into. So when you save a prefab in one scene, it's already got that. Now at the same time, you might have 20 different prefabs that are all using that stuff, and they all have slightly different variables set. Now at the same time, when you are, but then you'd be setting state for every single thing, and so it makes sense that the prefab has no knowledge of that. Okay, I don't complain about Unity's choice here. All right, but anyway, that way you can hold onto your references without having to worry about losing them. Middle ground, I destroyed its reference with physics object. Just discard the changes, seriously. Yes. Oh, maybe I hit cancel. Did I hit cancel? No, it's still there. So let's change that back for now. That's physics object that I called it. The class. I changed the class back. Got it. So that's not this code. I can just change back your code. Okay, so that was thingy is now physics object. I need to go change its name here. So physics object is now changing back to thingy to match the class name that I put back. Save it, return to Unity, and this should just automatically update itself. Okay, so there's thingy. Yeah, you've got all of these things in here, and there are so many settings for every object in here that it kind of feels like the majority of them probably have defaults, that this type of object will operate like this. This type of object will operate like this. So literally having another set of settings that you can pull in and using something like an observable to hold on to that. Because the observables in my case, while I was using defaults for like Boolean and float, I can also have one that has a collection of fields, a variety of different settings like relative pushed and sticky velocity, previous and current movement, previous position, that I could have all of those things being stored inside of it. Okay, was pushed, touched ground, so you have these things as variables that can be changed inside the editor. That seems a little odd. Was pushed, that it's something you can change yourself manually. A public Boolean. That sounds like this is being referenced by other objects and you were just exposing the field. In that case, if it's something that you don't want the designer to be able to manipulate, because I'm assuming that could potentially mess up the state, I would hide this, use the hide in inspector attribute, which I think you may have been using otherwise. Down collisions. I don't know what that is yet. I'm actually kind of fascinated to find out more. All right, so I don't think I'm gonna dive much more into the code, but interpolated transform updater. I assume your code. On awake and fixed update, you're calling these. Wait, why? Okay, now I'm really curious. F12, so there's your transform. It is a mono behavior. Why do you do this one? Interpolated transform updater, because the reason I'm asking about that is because this is also a mono behavior. So why do you have something else calling its late fix? Because that's happening during a fixed update, and you're using two different setups of the physics updates. Okay, I'll assume that that's the case. But why not use fixed update inside of your own code to call that? That feels a little weird. Now, of course, you are getting the type, so you're getting its interpolated transform. So on awake, you go find that object, and then you call on it. This does seem like something that should be part of the other one. I know that I was talking before about scripts becoming too large, but at the same time, this is very specific. This is something that it sounds like you're expecting this code to happen. Interpolated transform updater. No, okay, got it. So it sounds like you're making something happen twice. The fixed updater happens twice. That it gets called once here for a frame, and then it also gets called again, potentially calling the fixed update. So it's calling the late fixed update and the fixed update at the same time. I can't say I'm sure what you're trying to do here, but interpolated, my memory of interpolated must be off right now, but my memory of that is that it was happening every other. So like interpolated scan lines, I thought that was where it skips a line, and then on the next frame it comes through and does the second set of lines, which would imply that on this one you would actually only be wanting to call fixed update every other time. But I'm probably wrong. Okay, let's just read this. I might just have my vocabulary off here. Used to allow a later script execution order for fixed update other than gameplay transform. It is critical that this script runs after all other scripts that modify a transform from fixed update. So it sounds like this is literally just to do a late fixed update. Oh, which has a typo. Oh, I moved the D. That was why. I accidentally dragged that. Okay. Still, this seems like it could have been that you could have done this exact same thing inside of your code and had late fixed update. Wait, I thought late fixed update was actually a thing here. I don't tend to mess with the physics side for that very much, but let's see. Thingy is right there, and so if I had public void late update. Oh, that's late update. Got it. What was the physics one that I'm looking at? Updater. Fixed update. So, public void fixed update. Okay, got it. There's not a late fixed update. Okay, cool. I actually like that. That sounds like a feature I'd probably want to pull into Unity by default, particularly dealing with things like animation changes, that after all the physics happen, then the animations happen, or not for physics itself, but for animations. If I change animation state in the update frame, but then the animation itself does things. So, for instance, if I have a foot follower that when a foot is on the ground, I make sure that it actually matches the shape. Now, I know that there's things in there for it. I'm just giving an example. Then I would want to actually use this, where I call it in a late state to change it after the fact. Because the update happens, then the animation update happens, and then and so it overwrites anything you change about the animation framework. If it's active, if it's doing something. Okay, so yeah, anyway, big thing is the code size seems a little excessive for this. The name thingy, I really recommend changing it. Your code is obviously growing. You're obviously planning on using this longer term or for a much larger project, and changing its name, you can do that. You can do it fairly easily. Field names with the formerly known as to make sure serialization is maintained. Change the class name and change the file name, and Unity will automatically pick that up. Change out some of these to be like evolutions. To be clear, use the not scriptable, but summary, the XML tags, in order to make these states more well known and understood. Let's see. Has gravity, same thing. XML comments for these, or for to-do statements. Just a strong suggestion of using the hashtag warning in front of it so it shows up on your list and in your warnings to start emphasizing that you have stuff to go catch up on. Okay, let's see. Clear thingies. Yeah, the naming on this it's awkward. Minor thing is in Microsoft's defaults, after you close a set of brackets, unless it goes immediately to another closing bracket, you put a space there. It's standard for Microsoft for readability in C#. Okay, hide and inspector. You have public fields here that are exposed for other objects to be able to use, but you don't want the player to be able, or the designer to be able to mess with it. Okay. Let's see. All thingies. A collection of every thingy that exists in a scene. You know what? I guess thingy, I keep complaining about that, but it's a thing. Like a rigid body. It has physics. It has an understanding of how it operates within the world and how it interacts with other things. Okay, but I still think giving it a more formal name might make a lot of things more obvious. Ooh, relative velocity. Velocity created by the thingy itself, velocity caused by being pushed by another thingy, and velocity created by resting on another moving thingy. Sticky. That's what sticky velocity is. That it's resting on an object. Is that what it's intended for? Is stuck, that you move onto something so it's a stuck thingy. Okay, that's kind of interesting. For the points where I've done systems like that, what I ended up doing, and this might not work, and I don't know the amount of work it would take in this, whether it would make sense or not, or if you even care. But when I did something similar to this, where I had objects that you could place on other objects inside of the scene, I would just reset the parent. So after something lands on something, or if I put this one spinning thing on top of this other spinning thing, I would set its parent and then its rotation in the world. So for instance, if it goes onto a wall and you're moving right and left, its parent is now different, its rotation is now different, so its right and left is now up and down. Now, that doesn't sound like what you're looking for. I really liked it for the rotational turrets, though. Anyway, but that's probably nothing that you care about. Now, this one's CH. Naming on this one, I have no idea what CH is. Collision handler. Okay, collision handler. I recommend getting rid of that format, that instead you literally write these things out as collision handler. So you could say this dot collision handler dot, and let's just see if we can do the rename. Come on, where's the rename? Am I in collisions? No. Come on, you can use another name dot, and hey, why isn't control dot coming up with anything? Control dot. And now I'm using sprite renderer. That's much more clear and easy to read. My sound booth is attacking me with foam. It's not every day a ceiling tile falls on someone. Okay, which maybe that's a sign that this is going too long. And how long have I been going on this for? I am at 1 hour and 43 minutes. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm going to cut it. Okay. All right. Hopefully some of this has been useful. I'm not getting into the actual physics itself of trying to deal with that. There'd be too much for me to just do on a code review. This is more just dealing with specific things like having the extra lines after here, which is just kind of a standard in .NET. But that's personal opinion. A lot of this stuff, it doesn't really matter. And again, code that works, works. If the solution works in the end, the question is, if you're planning on using this long term, is it going to continue to be easy to maintain, to understand, for a new person to make their way through? Okay. Yeah. Anything else? I'm just scrolling through it really fast to see if there's anything else in here. So I'm just going to spot check maybe one other thing. Fall right. Fall methods do not push other thingies, but do go as far as they can up to the distance before hitting another object. And then the equivalent speed becomes 0. Huh. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, usually in my code, I'm usually for a collision detection, once I detect that there was a collision, I push it back and set it. That actually, it's not a bad idea to include this advanced check to get that. That's what another interesting way to do that. Okay, and that's why you have the commit shift right, that will overlap right, that if it doesn't overlap right, you're doing all of these things, hit equals true, distance, commit shift right. So you're committing shift right by the distance, but you might be changing the distance here if it's actually going to overlap something. That way it gets pushed back by that distance. Okay. That's interesting. So you have a command that basically tells it to fall right by this distance, but if there's something blocking it, that's an interesting way to do it. I kind of like that. Okay, and if there's a hit, hit is true because it will overlap when you're going right by this distance. I do like those commands. You could still apply that to the general Unity system and just have the collision check, an overlap check between two rectangles or between different shapes. All right, but that's cool. You wrote all this code for yourself, and then you get to control the specifics. If all you care about are boxes in this, you don't care about angles, then you don't need anything like the rectangles because those include angles in them and can effectively kind of make it more complicated for the math it has to check. Now, well, yeah, I'll leave it at that. Fall up, it's checking fall down. That's cool stuff. I like the nature of this one. Deactivate. Deactivate. So does deactivate? Set game out. Okay, so you're actually destroying or hiding the game object, so it doesn't do anything. Are you in the camera? Overlaps the global camera bounds. Oh, that was one of the things I wanted to check out, your global variables. Okay, public class quad. So you've got classes in here. Where are all these ones? Public class ease, ease quad, ease quar. I don't know what a quar is. I'm now very intrigued. What is a quar? All right, what is a quin? Okay, sine, exponential, circle. Okay, so it seems it's a math function. In, out. These are easing functions? Oh, yeah, they're easing functions. Must be a form of easing. That's kind of cool. That you have all these different ways to do that just called up in there. Bounce. Put the full names. Forget about the four names. You're using a system where you can use strongly typed values, and that makes things so much easier. I would much rather have a 20 variable line or a 20 character method name or field name than I would have a field name that doesn't use enough characters to actually explain what's going on. Okay, lerp. Wait, are you doing anything different from normal lerp? Why not just use the normal lerp function inside of Unity? So it's all in one place. That could be one call out for it. And then you've got other things like here's your lerp with various ease functions. Okay, I like that. That's a good reason for it. All right, so global static class line. Why? Okay, this is a little weird here. Just one thing that it seems a little bit weird on this is the fact that this isn't static as a class. These aren't static functions and methods coming out of it. It feels like they should be. 0 references. Oh, there's an interesting 0 references. Quinn. So you do have a spot that's using this, and it's using, a static function inside of here. Other ones like cube, they're static functions inside. Got it. Quad, static functions inside. This is making more sense. So static float lerp, you've got those, and then you've got the classes that you spread them out. If the classes have nothing that they're containing normally, I strongly recommend just creating the whole classes as static as well. Just to emphasize that there's no type definition that it would normally have. I can't remember, but I feel like there is some minor benefit to compiling or the execution time for these, but I don't remember what it was. Okay, global class, you have bounds. You are getting the camera.main. Oh, camera.main. One thing I recommend is it's not that big of a deal, really, because there's only like one thing on the list. But camera.main, to the best of my understanding, is actually it's checking for anything inside of the main layer that has a camera object. So if you use other things inside of the main layer of Unity, so if I go into here and I select of course it's reloading, I must have made some changes. Maybe I broke stuff too. Okay, but we have the layer walls. Was it layer tag? Sorry, it's main. So we have main camera. There's no real reason why other things would use it, but I feel like that's kind of a hideous system to depend on because it's actually doing a lookup of finding an object with this tag. Now, my understanding is that when things have a tag, that tag actually becomes a list that gets maintained inside of Unity, so that it's actually just looking up a known list and there's only one element in the list then. But in that case, I really recommend having like an observable or something else that just passes it out there so you control where that comes from. Anyway, but you're grabbing this information from the camera. That's fine. That's cool. The stuff on the main camera, I mean, it works. But relying on it, it isn't just a direct reference. It is something where it does have to do a lookup. So there is a minor expense there, even if it has an O of 1. Okay. Sam time. Okay. Sam time, says Sam, the developer. So this, I'm assuming, is time that gets used to emphasize that the game is still running, but we are pausing stuff. So we're slowing things down, speeding them up, like an explosion might slow down, even though the game time is still up to speed. 6 references, current missile time plus equals SAM time, T. So that's a way of speeding things up, I guess? I don't know. I wonder if that's a reference to how you speed things up in the game. If that is, then I should see SAM time increase from one of these. Current time, time in state. Okay, SAM time does not get increased by anything, so we literally have this constant value that gets just applied to everything. Wait, do you even need that to be in a class? I feel like you don't. Cannot direct. Okay, yeah, that's right, you don't. I forget what it is, but there's something else you can put up there. Okay, yeah, most of your code looks good. I'm not really, there's nothing that jumps out as a major red flag, just some organizational differences if you're planning on distributing that I would plan on getting your code into its own known folder name so that you can export it as an asset package that other people can use, so like a named folder. It does look like that is your intention, that you're generating something that it's basically another game engine inside of Unity. I think that's entirely reasonable to have a different physics engine and overlap their stuff. So, especially when there is a performance gain on it or a simplicity gain on it, that you have an entirely different model of how things work, rather than attempting to make all the Unity stuff work for you. It can be quite a learning exercise. But at the same time, if you go through the learning exercise to do that, you will potentially have much lighter code because the amount of work it would have taken to do this, you could still put your own overlapping class on top of it that just manages the existing rigid body, that it manages the existing collider, the physics materials system inside of Unity. To produce much the same thing, reduce your own code necessities, and still accomplish the same general outlook. That being said, your code works, your game works, you're building something with it. It was cute and fun to play when I tried it. So keep it. Go with it. Sounds good. Hope this has been useful, if not super long.